Okay. Good morning, everyone. So welcome to our Big Bold Brash, the Circular Water Economy and the Future of Water session. I'll just introduce our panelists. We've got Brian Bedford from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs here. Brian Bedford is the Executive Director of Local Government Infrastructure and Finance and Deputy Inspector of Municipalities with the BC Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Brian has a background in environmental science and a focus on sustainable and resilient infrastructure. His role with the province for the past 15 years is administering infrastructure funding programs for BC local governments and First Nations, encouraging innovative infrastructure solutions, oversight of the local government financial system, and supporting the development of asset management and sustainable service delivery. He's been involved with small and large-scale core public infrastructure projects throughout the province and work that has resulted in the implementation, integrated resource recovery techniques, piloting of natural assets, and climate resilience. Brian is a founding member of Asset Management BC and a board member with RESO Centre for Mobilizing Innovation and is the ministry representative to the EOCP board. So next we have Kalpna. Kalpna Solanki is President and CEO of the Environmental Operator Certification Program, Canada's first water and wastewater facility classification and environmental operator certification program. Kalpna is passionate about the water and wastewater industry and feels fortunate to work with a fabulous team and board of directors. She holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Business Administration from Simon Fraser University, a diploma in environmental health from British Columbia Institute of Technology, and she has recently completed a Harvard Business School program on strategy. Kalpna also enjoys volunteering. She currently sits on 2 boards. In her spare time, you will find Kalpna diving somewhere warm, kayaking, cycling, or hiking with her 3 dogs and on the slopes in the winter. So next we have Bruce Caister from KCX Engineering. Bruce has many years in the water and wastewater industry operating a variety of plants in municipal and industrial settings. He came to BC from Manitoba in 2010, where he was employed with the Vancouver Convention Centre to operate their Class 4 Blackwater recycling facility. He relocated back to Manitoba during the pandemic, but remains actively involved with the Convention Centre's Blackwater plant as a private contractor to provide oversight and operator services. Last but not least is Tom Robinson. Tom is a senior wastewater engineer and project manager with more than 30 years of municipal wastewater treatment planning, risk management, design, construction, and commissioning experience. In the past 10 years, Tom has led multi-firm wastewater facility design teams in the design of greenfield or complex retrofits exceeding $150 million. Tom uses his strong communication and management skills to keep teams client-focused and provide excellent service. So with that, we will start the session.
Thank you, Tara. So you might notice that we have 3 men on the stage here, and Megan is not here, and Megan had a family emergency. And I reached out to some contacts at Associated Engineering and said, hey, this is your opportunity to shine. And Tom was either volunteered or he volunteered, I'm not sure, but we're very happy to have him with us. Thank you. So our topic, this session is Big, Bold, Brash, the circular water economy and the future of water. Canada is considered to be, for the most part, we think of it as a land of plenty when it comes to water. We've typically gone with a model of take, make, consume, and dispose. Yes, every year when we think about drought and conservation efforts and so on, we do some of that, but you can't always outconserve population growth. The success of water conservation programs is often measured by reductions in per capita consumption. But for a static utility that does not anticipate future growth, reducing per capita water use decreases supply, maintenance, and environmental costs. So we need to think a little bit outside the box. We need to think about a transition to a circular water economy, which requires breaking down silos and fostering collaboration amongst all stakeholders. Although effective water stewardship is so important for thriving industries and communities, And industries may be major customers or users of the products from water and wastewater utilities. Industrial water stakeholders have not traditionally had a prominent platform to discuss solutions to their water challenges, and neither have they been included in conversations with municipal utilities about sustainable water solutions. We need to give more thought to the circular water economy and a consideration of closed loop systems. With the development of more diversified resource options, efficient transport systems, and rethinking of wastewater as a resource rather than waste. Water utilities have been early adopters in general of technologies and practices that support the circular water economy, driven by increasingly stringent regulations informed by breakthrough science and competed to respond to climate change impacts and urbanization. So that's just to give you a bit of a background in terms of what we're thinking about here. Really think about breaking down those silos, working collaboratively, and really thinking about a closed loop system. So I'm just going to open it up with some questions to the panel. So first of all, and in no particular order, anyone can go from the panel. So the first question is, what are your thoughts on the belief that you can't outconserve population growth? Anyone would like to take that?
Well, maybe I can just start off by saying that with the convention center and what we're doing there with the Blackwater recycling plant, just to give you an example, today we're hosting 2 conferences, and there's probably anywhere about 6,000 people in the building. So we're consuming water. But the beauty of that is we are a closed loop system. So any wastewater that is generated is going directly into my plant and being sent out into the building again. So can you outconserve population growth? You know, I don't know if I can really thoroughly answer that question other than to say that what it does is maybe highlights the importance of capturing all your wastewater. Maybe not all of it, but certainly the domestic stuff, the domestic streams. You know, industrial might be another thing altogether, but at least do that or consider that. I think that's an option that BC really has to consider in these, you know, these changing times. I mean, I've only been out here 13 years and the climate has changed so much since I arrived in 2010. Like it's quite astounding.
Okay. Thank you. Tom O'Brien.
I was born and raised in Vancouver, and I'll let you guess what generation I would fit into. But the idea of water was always in BC was something that came from snowpack and high in the mountains, and we didn't really have to do very much to it. We were blessed with that, but we sort of took credit for that in a certain way as well, which probably wasn't really earned or deserved. And we used it and we disposed of it, and we were pretty happy with that arrangement. The idea of reusing that, especially in some sort of personal way, was really not a part of our thinking at all. I remember the first time I was in California and in one of the Orange County plants where they actually were doing closing that loop from a wastewater treatment plant. It was an indirect potable reuse where they would put it in the ground and it would be extracted in about a year. But it was an interesting exercise for me to taste that water. And I throw that out there as a bit of a challenge because for my generation, the idea of drinking something that had gone through a wastewater treatment plant was kind of out there, but uncomfortable. But it's going to take baby steps like this for the public as a whole to gradually gain acceptance and to get comfortable with the idea. And you mentioned also on the industrial side, that's going to be a different challenge. Industry is going to be making decisions, on a fiscal basis, and when reclaimed water is the same cost or lower, or at least close, that's when they'll probably be more inclined to look at it seriously and see if it can meet their needs. It's interesting from a wastewater treatment perspective because I think we've been doing wastewater reclaimed water in various capacities inside wastewater treatment plants for years and years and years, for applications that don't require potable water. But moving out of that it's going to take some getting used to, and take people a while to get more comfortable with that. I have more thoughts on that later, but I'll pass it to Brian.
Thanks. Certainly see that water conservation can only take us so far. There's still definitely a lot of room to go there, because our water conservation or water use per capita in Canada is still well above our European counterparts. So our daily habits of individuals can help extend the water that's already in the pipes. We've seen some good success in various communities over the past 10 years where they faced a lot of growth. I know of one Okanagan community that they're actually using less water on a daily basis than they were 10 years ago, and they've had significant growth in that time by implementing a variety of water conservation measures and public education. So that's one step. Universal metering, leak detection are a few other steps to add into that mix. But then we need to take, as noted, the next step, and making more efficient and effective use or reuse of treated effluent. And on the industrial side, in the Peace, we've got Dawson Creek treating in partnership with one of the oil and gas companies, producing treated effluent to be used in the fracking industry instead of taking it from the natural waters or municipal water. So small steps, small pilot projects here and there. And as we densify, you see it in Vancouver, and you're starting to see it more on the island and in the Okanagan. We need to start paying attention to stormwater and rainwater reuse, because we're hardscaping more and more of the landscape in that dense areas, which presents an opportunity to grab that rainwater. And I think we may hear a bit about that from Bruce today. So to grab that rainwater and put it to reuse as well. So not just focusing on reusing wastewater, but also focusing on what can we do with the rainwater coming out of the sky in the urban landscapes. So a little variety of things that all need to be added into sort of our business as usual as we move forward.
Thank you. So Bruce has given an example of treating wastewater as a resource rather than waste, with regards to the convention center west, where the effluent from the facility that Bruce runs is used for flushing the toilets, used for watering the rooftop gardens. Any other examples similar to that you can think of, either Tom or Brian?
Sure, I can jump in with a couple and then hand it over to you, Tom. And this is not a municipal example per se, but a development in Victoria about 2007, Dockside Green, you may have heard of it. It's on a brownfield industrial land. It's a multi-unit, multi-purpose density development. I can't remember the number of towers, and there's a few retail spaces and office spaces. But part of it sits on top of a tertiary wastewater treatment plant. And the effluent from that is used to add to the water course that runs through the site. But it's also all the units within all the condos. Their toilets are flushed with it. Their washing machines wash their clothes with it. And you can sit there and have a coffee on top of the wastewater treatment plant any given day of the week. So
I do that anyways.
Yeah, I know. This is the crowd that I was like, we have coffee in a wastewater treatment plant every day anyways. What are you talking about? But it's an eye opener for the general public to sit there and realize they're sitting on top of a wastewater treatment plant. It's a great example. It's from 2007. We don't have a lot more examples yet, and we're 15 years later, so it's a little disappointing in that front. So the more push over on that side. And then we've got some examples around the province where we use reusing effluent for irrigation purposes, whether it's parks and golf courses, or in Cranbrook where they irrigate the ranch land, the pasture lands for the cattle. So those are, it's an effective use. You're reusing the effluent. You're not having to discharge it to a water body, and it's offsetting other demands, either whether it's irrigation water coming out from a groundwater source or other, or offsetting what might have been drawn from a municipal source. So, there's some good examples. Nakusp uses it for irrigation in their public park facilities and such. So, there's little snippets around the province where this is underway, and it's been underway for quite some time. So it's a matter of sort of bringing that back and shining a light on it, so people realize that, hey, this is doable, this is normal, it's within regulatory environment, and it can help offset day-to-day cost and can have a reasonable return on investment.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. Examples like the convention center in Dockside Green are great. To really make a dent, you're looking, you'd really like to find large scale systems, and certainly around here with the drought that you're facing, we would, irrigation of agricultural land seems to be a bit of a win. And of course, there has to be some care taken with that, but that's probably an area that we could push on and make some progress, I would think.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to, I think I've made a comment about this before, that I'm a bit of a geek and I watch science fiction and read science fiction. And it's not out of the realm of possibilities. If anyone has read Dune or watched the movies, the Fremen wear these still suits, and they basically recycle the water within their waste and within their suits, and that is their drinking water. And when I say that, that is not outside the realm of possibilities. That's kind of what happens with the International Space Station. They don't take thousands and thousands and thousands of liters and then just dispose of it. There is a lot of reclamation that takes place, and the water gets reused. Interestingly, a few years ago, when I talked to someone at the Ministry of Health with regards to a new certification that is being offered in California and Nevada that is related to direct and indirect potable reuse. And I said, do you think there's an appetite for that in BC? And I was told, oh no, we're fine, we're okay. But that wasn't that long ago. That was maybe 7 years ago. But here we are. We've got drought situation right now. I'm sending out emails to water suppliers going, can you let us know how you're doing? There are communities in Texas and California who have both direct and indirect potable reuse. So it's happening already. And, sometimes you kind of go like, there's that little bit of that yuck factor in terms of, ew, like who wants to drink stuff that comes out of the sewage treatment plant or the wastewater treatment plant. But in a way, it's happening already, because what is discharged into a water course upstream is very often used by a community downstream as its water source. I read a book recently. I think it's called The Human Essentials. If anyone's interested in wastewater, it's actually really interesting. I know, I'm a bit of a geek. But anyway, and it talks about how the River Thames in England, when you drink water, in London, if you drink water from the tap, it is treated by Thames Water. That water has likely gone through 9 guts. So imagine that. So getting back to the panel here, Brian, why is the circular water economy important to government?
Well, it's where I have a little bit of a government spiel, so bear with me. Sort of where I've given that some of those government speaking notes that I need to address. I'll try to make them light and interesting. But the circular economy is essentially not new. It's just new branding, right? It's new branding for what can be done, what is being done, and it's not a bad way to kind of catch the attention of the current folks. Of course, it remains both a challenge and an opportunity for our core public infrastructure. Our existing setups of our infrastructure that's been built over the last 70 years or more is essentially in our watersheds dehydration infrastructure, despite how it waters our individual people in our homes. We take water out at the top of the watershed, we put it in giant straws, pipes, and we flow it down, we use it, we put it back in pipes, and we discharge it at the end of the watershed. We remove that water from its ecosystem service. It doesn't flow through that watershed as it used to. So if we thought about this years ago, we would have built our water treatment plant and our wastewater treatment plant next to each other, not upstream and downstream. So that's going to be hard to rectify because of all the distribution and conveyance. So we need to think more broadly about how to reuse that effluent. It's of interest to government. The province has been supporting quote unquote sort of circular economy projects for quite some time through our infrastructure funding programs, going back to 2005 with the Gas Tax Innovation Fund, where we funded a number of projects that reused effluent in different ways, continuing through programs that succeeded it in the years, like Small Communities Fund, Clean Water Wastewater Fund, and the current tranche of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Particularly the last intake of the Environmental Quality Program had a focused section on that value add of reuse of resources from waste, reuse of effluent, etc. So definitely, and then so municipal affairs has been kind of pushing it along through the infrastructure funding program sector, but it's gotten the attention of government more broadly. And Ministry of Environment came out not too long ago with the big Clean BC push. And so Clean BC is the province's branding for a whole suite of programs around sort of becoming more effective and efficient of use of our environmental resources. And a key component of that is using the terminology. Now, BC is building a circular economy focused on, I'm going to read my notes, sorry. Focused on sharing, reusing, repairing, and or recycling our resources. This approach is to pollute less, reduce use of our landfills, more efficient use of our resources. The vision of Clean BC is a future where the BC economy embraces the principles of circularity, waste prevention, resource efficiency to support a clean growth economy that reduces emissions, underpinned by effective core public infrastructure, and has a fair, inclusive approach across economic sectors. Principles are around things like design out waste from the services we use resources at their highest economic and environmental values through its life cycle, ensure GHG reduction, environmental protection, and regeneration and protection of the environment and land, and enable and encourage innovation. So it is a key priority of this government. It will be, when you have these high overarching government objectives like Clean BC, what it helps is provide an opportunity for creation of programs that sit within it that interface with local governments and First Nations around infrastructure that supports that further. So as we move forward and develop new programs, it gives us the ability to embed more priorities around reuse of resources through our infrastructure and through upgrades to our through the projects through the programs. So all in sum, now's the time. It's of interest to the government, and ideally we'll see more of it coming out through programs that are more directly related to sort of the next tranche of infrastructure funding.
So just staying with you, Brian, in terms of you mentioned Dockside Green, can you discuss any recent initiatives related to this that government has supported?
There's this, when we did the last intake, which had sort of the environmental quality substream of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, there was an added section that was focused, as I mentioned, on resource reuse and recovery. And so we've got programs, and there's also there's a parallel one called the Clean BC Communities Fund, which was looking at primarily focused on GHG reduction. And so in both those programs, we're prioritizing project applications that had that circular economy kind of component added to it. There's a project. What I'm struggling with here is some of them have been announced and are public and some are not. So we've got some wastewater projects looking at reuse of effluent. We've got energy efficiency projects. We've got heat recovery projects. Whether or not this one's announced, it's already there's parts of it already in function here in Vancouver, right? Southeast Falls Creek, grabbing the heat from the lift station and heating Olympic Village. Cogeneration, creating electricity and heat from what's now being branded as renewable natural gas. We used to call it biomethane, right? So those kind of projects are getting funding from government programs to be implemented over the next 5-10 years, so to speak. There's also projects where I guess one thing around renewable natural gases is a little newer from, whether on-site use or cogen is upgrading it to then, sell it off and put it into the Fortis grid. So these things are all starting to happen on projects across the province.
Thank you. Bruce, there's another project that you're involved with as well, with regards to kind of thinking outside the box with regards to water. Could you tell us a bit about that?
A few years ago, the CEO of Pavco approached my business partner and I, Jamie Moore, to look at designing and constructing a rainwater harvesting system in BC Place. So we sat down in the food court right across from the convention center one day with pen and paper and drew out what we wanted. And I should maybe just say prior to that, we toured some known rainwater harvesting system sites, one in Abbotsford in particular that we went out to see in their new community sports center. They were happy with it. We looked at their design. We took what we liked, and then we went back and designed what we thought would work best for us. And what I really liked about the BC Place location was that roof, that magnificently huge 11-hectare roof, which is high enough up. It's not really an attractive bird roost. And so the one thing we did as part of our due diligence is we took samples of the rainwater coming off that roof, and not initially just when it starts raining, but maybe 20 minutes after the roof's been washed off. Take those samples, send them off to ALS labs, tell us what's in it. Well, they came back with virtually no fecal coliforms in it, again, because it's not a bird roost. Suspended solids or dissolved solids, virtually nothing. The only thing of concern maybe was the pH, just because it's pure water, it's rainwater. But regardless, we knew we had a good, pristine source there. And so with that, we designed our plant around that. To start off with, there's two tanks, two cisterns as we refer to them, total capacity about 22,000 gallons. So the water enters, the rainwater from the roof enters the first tank after it's been raining for about 10 minutes. Then the supply valve opens, passes through a filter, goes into a tank, fills those cisterns. Right downstream from that is a little pump skid that we've got, which contains recirc pumps, UV lamps, and liquid chlorine control system. And that is primarily to recirc the water in the cisterns, just to keep a chlorine residual in it, and to give it an extra level of disinfection through the UVs, plus an extra filtration step. And so this recirculation unit is designed to run for 4 hours or for 45 minutes every 6 hours. And that just keeps a chlorine residual in the cisterns for when the water is called upon for use in the facility. And right now, they're only using the water for field maintenance. Like when you get a football game, you put the lime down the field markings, then you got to wash that off for the soccer game for different markings. That's really all it's being used for now. But what we have found is the quality of water that comes out of this thing is very comparable to what comes out of your tap. I'm not suggesting for a minute that you can drink it, but the quality is good enough that now they want to take it to the next step and start using it to supply their washrooms, much like what we're doing at the convention center. So it's a system that's we're very proud of, works very well, does exactly what's intended, and we may have an opportunity to expand on that. And I will just add, there is another client. They operate office buildings around the Lower Mainland and in Vancouver here. And we're working with them right now. We've designed a system for them. They had an existing system which just was not, like it was very poorly designed. And they weren't even using it. It was just that poorly designed. So we came in there, assessed everything, designed what we thought would work best for them. It's now at the stage where they're constructing what we've recommended in terms of the individual skids that they're going to need for the rainwater harvesting system. And we expect to be installing that sometime this fall. So those are worthwhile projects. I mean, rain from the sky. I mean, water from the sky. It's basically free if you don't have to treat it too much. I mean, you do got to do your due diligence. Rainwater that has touched the ground, you maybe want to avoid that. But in our particular case with BC Place and this other location that we've got here where the water is coming from the roof, it's not touching vegetation. You're getting no natural colors or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just moving on with that, that's a great example. What about, you think about, and I'm sure with your travels and so on, you've come across situations where other countries that are more parched than we are have come up with innovative solutions. Anything you would like to share in terms of what you've seen that maybe some ideas that we should think about emulating here?
I'll jump in here. There are other examples from areas that are more parched for sure. I mean, I think Singapore was one of the first countries, city-states that took it really seriously and produced what they called new water from the Changi wastewater facility. And that's because they're so small geographically, but with a large population and completely dependent on neighboring countries that would supply them with water. And that's an uncomfortable reality for them. You know, I think interesting listening to Bruce and so on. It takes creativity. It takes a little bit of outside the box thinking. And I think part of that creativity that we look for and that we've built into some of our projects is that the phasing is a part of the creativity. There may not be a reason to build something now, but if it's part of a longer term plan, and you're burying, you know, a pipeline, put a reclaimed water line right beside it to take reclaimed water back from the wastewater plant into an urban area, and build the system in phases, and fund it. You know, make sure that happens as a part of the plan, and that's a tough thing to do in days where you know, we're seeing costs rise so dramatically, and governments are struggling to you know, to even build the basics. But you know, I think creativity and the willingness to build in phases is part of that puzzle. It may help get us part of the way there.
Good point. Being prepared, doing things in phases, done it in a lot of other type of projects. But to Kalpna's question about other places in the world, Australia, the Gold Coast is a fairly densely populated but very parched area. All new developments over there have potable water pipe going to the house and a reclaimed water pipe going to the house. Reclaimed water is for everything external. It's for washing clothes. It's for flushing the toilet. So they're purple piped houses, right? They've also, so along with the infrastructure, they've instituted lots of public education programs and intervention programs. I call it intervention because whereas here in BC, we've been in Clean BC, we've been pushing people to make their homes more energy efficient, but it's all voluntary, right? You get an advisor come in, they do an assessment of your house, you go off and you hire contractors to do some work, advisor come back and checks it, and you get a rebate. Great. But it's based on whether the homeowner is interested, if the homeowner can afford it, et cetera. With water in the Gold Coast, they had a plumbing version of this program, except it wasn't voluntary. If you were a high water user, they would send a team of plumbers into your house, change out leaky faucets, change out high use toilets, replace things, and then, you know, walk away with leaving you with a much more efficient, water efficient home. Maybe not very palatable here yet, but maybe an idea that we should think about in the future.
Thank you. Bruce, anything from you on that? Yeah.
No, I don't think I have much to add on that.
Okay. So one other country that I've heard quite a bit about, I haven't been there, but in terms of water conservation and really thinking of wastewater as a resource is Israel. And when you think about it, this is this tiny little country and predominantly desert. And yet, when I lived in the UK, we would get so much produce that was grown in Israel, interestingly, like oranges, peppers, a whole bunch of different things. And so at a conference at the Canadian Water and Wastewater Association, met a delegation from Israel. And the amount of processes they have in place to conserve water is phenomenal, but also the use of reclaimed water and also the use of biosolids for fertilizer. So that whole cycle is being addressed in terms of that. The other thing also with regards to some other aspects in terms of energy recovery, when I was at the Kelowna wastewater treatment facility, the heat from that facility is actually used to heat parts of the Okanagan College campus. So even just some of those things, instead of letting that heat just go into the environment, actually reusing it for buildings. So getting back to the panel here, what can utilities do in terms of thinking outside the box? Say our operators, our utilities, what can they do in terms of this focus on really getting away from that thinking that we've always had of take, make, consume, and dispose.
I'll just jump in with a smaller scale example than Kelowna, right? I remember having a site visit to the water control valve at the reservoir for Peachland up in the hills behind the community. And it's quite somewhat remote, particularly in the winter. And so it used to be all manual, and they wanted to move it to SCADA. It doesn't have power up there. So they put in 2 little micro hydro generators on it, enough to heat the place and to run the SCADA. So small scale, simple things, but huge benefit on efficiency for staffing, for use of the facility. So it doesn't always have to be the big, we're going to heat a campus, or we're going to heat a suite of buildings, or we're going to reuse effluent. Like those small scale things will add up to efficiencies that are beneficial. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed over the past 20 years is that when infrastructure is built to to contribute to this question, it's operated with a certain amount of enthusiasm for the first few years, but it's not a surprise sometimes anymore to go in and see that something's no longer being used. It was a struggle. It wasn't cost effective. Things broke down, all kinds of different reasons, and a lot of times it was maybe because things were done just a little bit cheap on the install initially. So it's tough. It's going to take commitment. It's going to take creativity to find new things. But when we've made the effort to step out and do something, got to find a way to keep that working. Stepping away from progress like that is costly. It's a bit demoralizing as well. So we got to find ways to keep building on that. That's just one thought that comes up to my mind on that.
Well, the one experience I can add to that is years ago, I was the environmental manager of a large potato processing plant in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, my hometown. And our wastewater operations included a 22,000 cubic meter anaerobic digester. And I was introduced to this thing, first time I'd ever operated a digester, right from infancy, that is building up the biomass, introducing the wastewater to it, and then running this thing to the point where it's now producing biogas, methane, if you will. Well, for the first little while, we were flaring this stuff off to the atmosphere. And but the beauty of the whole system is it was designed that natural gas, that methane, if you will, could be sent back into the powerhouse where we had massive gas-fired boilers, steam boilers. And it took the first-class engineer a long time to get comfortable with the idea of using biogas in his very expensive, very large steam boilers. But once I got him convinced on it, and he started using that stream, he saw a 30% reduction in his natural gas costs just by something that we were producing in our own backyard right on the factory site. So just that example alone really got me realizing that wastewater can be a very valuable commodity. And secondly, the biomass that we were producing from that anaerobic digester, because it's a living, growing entity, you do have to waste some of it off. Well, the area farmers very quickly found out that this was it was a good fertilizer, and they were falling over themselves to get the fertilizer that we were the biomass that we were pulling out of our digester annually. So long as their land fit the criteria, they had to have like a clay base within 3 feet of the surface, things of that nature. And once we did sort of an assay just to see what the nutrient levels were, then we could determine how many pounds per acre we could spread on this land. So it was all an interesting and learning experience for me at that time, and it really taught me that wastewater in many variations can be a very valuable resource.
Okay.
I'll just add one quick thing. Some of the ideas, the projects that I've talked briefly about, they're actually coming not from the engineers, but from the operators themselves, right? That's where a lot of learning is coming, because the hands-on, it's the day-to-day, we could use this for X or Y, we could use reused effluent to do the stormwater flushing, these sorts of things. So there's a huge body of knowledge just rolling around in the heads of all the operators across the province, and we'd like to tap into it. There is one resource out there the province updated. It was a 2008 one. We redid it. It's now a website instead of a book called closingtheloop.ca. So if you're looking for ideas and generate discussion about how you can reuse a variety of different effluents, energy, etc., it's available online.
Thank you. Has anyone skied at Sun Peaks? Do you know where the snowmakers get their water from? Effluent from the wastewater treatment facility. It's actually a really interesting facility to go to because the biosolids are composted on site and they're used for landscaping. And then a lot of the effluent is used for the snowmakers. It's tested, it's clean, rather than use potable water, rather than use water from the wells and streams. That's kind of what happens there. As we wrap up, any closing remarks from our panel? And you have an example to show us, Brian, I believe.
Yeah, I got a short story. Taking this back to summer 2020, the height of COVID, sitting at home, trying to work and trying to keep my kids busy with school. And I see a little news blip about Village Brewery in Calgary. I'm thinking, I can't get there because of travel restrictions. They had produced 2 versions of their summer beer called Village Blonde. One, the traditional way with the traditional water they use, and the other was a partnership with the University of Calgary, the Pine Valley Wastewater Treatment Plant, Pine Creek, thank you, the Alberta Health Services, and Xylem. They took treated effluent and produced a batch of beer, and they sold them side by side on the shelves. So it says right there on the can, crafted with reused water, sustainable beer. It was fantastic. It was hard to get because it sold out so quickly, and they couldn't ship it to BC, but somehow 4-pack ended up on my front porch in Victoria. So that was the best beer I had during COVID.
Thank you. Tom, any closing remarks?
Well, that's kind of what it's going to take, right, to sort of punch through that. An idea that I haven't seen implemented before, but I don't know really why we don't have it, which is summer hydration sort of stations in the city that are using side by side, taste test, if you want to call it that, for normal drinking water and reclaimed water. I think that's a bit of a I'd like to see someone do that. I mean, I'm sure it's happening somewhere, but that could be happening on a much larger scale. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's an opportunity for Tara because she works for the city of Vancouver. Bruce, any closing comments from you?
Well, with regards to the differences from my home province of Manitoba and what I've seen out here in BC over the years, when it comes to biomass, particularly from wastewater treatment plants, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that it's a challenge for some of these municipalities to dispose of their biomass, typically by applying to agricultural land. A lot of people are against that. And I'm just wondering, have things changed? Are people's minds sort of coming around? Well, I mean, in Manitoba, not that the sun rises and sets there, but certainly we're an agricultural area and we recognize the benefits of biomass. So, hopefully, I know there's an ick factor there, and I think that's part of the problem here. So with conditions being what they are now, we want to reuse our water, and maybe this will help that cause as well in terms of biomass disposal.
It's a bit of a regional issue. Like, it's definitely an issue in the Capital Regional District, but just go up island and it's not so much in Nanaimo, or if you're here in the Lower Mainland, I mean, Jim can probably tell us, it's reused with mine reclamation and forestry and some agriculture. So it's really sort of regionally specific, but in some places, definitely an underutilized resource.
I find that with a lot of areas, it is used for kilns so it's basically for energy, the biomass, which it seems like an awful waste because it is such a valuable resource. And there is a lot of fuss with regards to, oh, that's so gross, we can't use that. Meanwhile, when you think about stuff, any produce on our shelves, it comes from all over the world. most of those countries use biosolids, and those biosolids are often nowhere nearly as well treated as the ones we use. So I have just a couple of minutes left. Any questions from the audience? And the only thing I would recommend is if there are any questions, please raise your hand. And if we can get you to use the microphone, the reason for that is that way the online audience can hear your question as well. Any questions from the audience here? Oh, over there. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, everyone. Very good discussion. My question is sort of for Brian. What programs that you can speak about for grant funding for municipalities to implement these types of technologies are available currently or upcoming?
That's a good question. The word currently is key because currently there isn't one. We're heading into renegotiations with Canada this fall, so it'll be we'll be looking at either sort of 2024 or 2025, and when those new programs come out that replace the existing one, which is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, you'll see more pieces related to BC's interest in supporting integrated resource recovery or circular economy, and also tying that with sort of climate resilience. They kind of go hand in hand. So we're in a bit of a gap, but it's a normal part of the cycle of the bilateral funding programs.
Okay, any other questions from the audience or in the on the online group as well? Any questions?
I'll come back to you guys. There's one online. Can they comment on environmental protection in regards to water preservation, more specifically on wetlands protection against new developments and the idea of integrating the existing wetlands into water and wastewater loop? I can repeat it.
I had a little trouble understanding the question, but stream flow augmentation and wetlands. I mean, we're seeing in BC with the drought conditions that we're having. These are areas that are really suffering, and I think it's another area to look at. There's a little bit of a factor. Making sure that the quality of the effluent that's being released into those environments isn't going to have a negative impact. But I think that's something that should be looked at really carefully. I think we have the need, and it's creating the opportunities that we didn't necessarily see 10 and 15 years ago.
And that we have time for just one quick question. There was someone over there with a question.
Yeah, hi, this is for Bruce. Probably from an operational perspective, would you choose reclaimed effluent over rainwater capture? Which one is easier, or is one easier than the other?
Well, they're both really good performers, but in terms of engagement, overall engagement, and just what's involved, I prefer the operations at BCC, the Blackwater reclamation. That's just such an interesting thing. I mean, where we've taken that plant from the day I first walked in there on November 1st, 2010 to where it is today, it's a completely different operation. Most of the original design, other than the tanks themselves, it's just not there. We've really altered the process flow, maximized the efficiencies of both the bioreactors, turned a wastewater holding tank, the raw wastewater holding tank actually turned into a bioreactor just through aeration. 11 cubic feet of air per minute using a very cheap golf course pond aeration device. So little things like that, we've really tailor-made that plant to suit our needs. And quite frankly, I'm looking for more raw product. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you very much to our panelists, Bruce Caister, Tom Robinson, and Brian Bedford. Thank you very much. And thanks again, as always, sir.